4.5 years researching women with large, loud, and often unladylike voices. The voices and career pathways of the professional dramatic soprano. These women have the largest and most powerful voice of the female operatic voice types. And their voices are used to convey some of the most powerful roles in the operatic canon. Like Brünnhilde, the Valkyrie warrior of Wagner's Ring Cycle. The physical vocal cords of these singers are thicker and larger than other sopranos, and they're able to leverage them to resonate unamplified over a 100-piece symphony orchestra. Now, it might be obvious from listening to that excerpt that the dramatic soprano is not a beginner's voice type. Women often don't start performing these roles until they're in their 40s. As Dolores Zajic, an American dramatic mezzo-soprano, said, of her early voice, it was loud. It was loud and unwieldy. It's difficult to coordinate that size of voice. It's kind of like a baby elephant trying to walk downstairs. In the Ring Cycle, Brünnhilde defies her father and he puts her to sleep inside a ring of fire. Now, other than this being an operatic example of patriarchal silencing, it's a metaphor for the maturing dramatic soprano's career trajectory. A mid-career transition to this heavy dramatic repertoire often means time away from the stage. To investigate this career pathway, I interviewed 13 women who have performed the role of Brünnhilde across the world from the Met to Melbourne Opera. These women were between the ages of 43 and 68, and I asked them, how do you build not just the voice, but the body and the psyche to perform Brünnhilde? My interviewees were incredibly generous and candid, many saying that these conversations were important because elite singers rarely discuss voice challenges in public, as any hint of vocal distress can negatively affect their careers. The question about how to build the voice, body, and psyche of a dramatic soprano has followed me through my career. Being invited to share my research with you today by the lovely Amalia Horden reminded me that my own performing voice and body have been judged and criticized since I was a child for being too big, too loud, and too much. As it turns out, Amalia and I attended the same ballet school in Canberra. And when I was about 10 or 11, I was encouraged to come to ballet school about 6 days a week to prepare for going on point. My parents, in weighing up this commitment, asked the ballet mistress if I had real potential as a ballet dancer. And they were told that my body type would be both too tall and too big for ballet. So I shifted my focus to musical theatre and started winning Eisteddfods and roles until I won a place at the Canberra School of Music in the studio of the star-making teacher, Anthea Moller. In one of my first lessons, Anthea said to me, you know, your voice is too big for musical theatre, and you're too tall and too robust to play the ingenue. I think you should pursue opera. So there it was again, too big, too tall, too loud, but at least I had found a place where I might belong, in opera. It turns out my story is not unique to me. All of my interviewees told variations of this same story. But although my voice was the right size for opera, it wouldn't mature until my 40s. And what was I to do before that? Well, despite this caveat, I did experience a decade of relative success for a young singer. I made the finals of the Australian Singing Competition, performing at the Sydney Opera House with the AOBO, and winning a full scholarship to the Royal College of Music in London. However, it was while I was a developing young artist at the English National Opera that I was again told that my voice had become too big and too much for my lyric mezzo repertoire. But E&O would be very, very interested in me if I would train up to becoming a dramatic soprano. There was no recognised pathway for me to do this, but I did give it a red-hot crack. That, however, is another story. Flash forward to 2020, and I make apologies for all the Melburnians in the room who might be triggered by the next part of the story. But I found myself in my 40s, in the prime of my vocal trajectory, sitting at home in the longest lockdown in the world. Not knowing if performing would ever come back as a viable career, I applied for a PhD at the ANU, which came with a 4-year stipend. Now, only a mid-tier, mid-career performing artist would think that $35,000 tax-free was a good deal. But with a mortgage, 2 young daughters at home, and a shaky future in performing and teaching online, it was a lifeline. What I didn't expect was how the stories of my interviews would help me not only find ownership over my large and loud voice, but also find agency to amplify the voices of other women in my industry. This brings me to Songs for Loud Women, a song cycle which retells Brunhilde's story through the words of the women who sing her. The cycle is devised by me and commissioned from 5 leading Australian female composers. As a researcher whose main creative practice is operatic performance, I didn't want to just write about the insights I gained from my interviews. Instead, I wanted to use the visceral and powerful nature of the dramatic female voice to sing about them. The cycle follows a journey from silencing to resonance. The first song, In the Fire, composed by Melody Ertversch, is about young girls with loud, rambunctious voices, the ones who are told to shh. Silencing Small, composed by Roya Safai, confronts all the ways women are told to minimize themselves and asks what happens when they lose the ability to say no. All That We Bear, composed by Anne Cause, explores the perceived shoulds surrounding motherhood, fertility, and career. As only 3 of my 13 interviewees had children, but more than half had wanted them. What the Fuck, composed by Sally Whitwell, plays on the German word for voice type being Fach, and it skewers operatic archetypes and asks, why do women in opera always have to die? And the final song, Technicolor, composed by Katie Abbott, we start to answer why these women stay in an industry so stacked against them. Because finding ownership of your voice after decades of being told you're too much is joyful. It's like going from black and white to Technicolor. I want to share a little bit more about Silencing Small and let you hear some of it, because I think this song holds the key to why this work matters. One of my interview subjects shared her experience of being on a prestigious young artist program where her instincts about her voice were constantly invalidated. During this same period, she was raped by someone in the opera house. In her own words, she said, being denied a voice in that physical trauma correlates so much with being denied a voice in other things. This was the heavy theme that I set before composer Roya Safai. Roya is a second-generation Iranian-Australian. Her expertise is in Persian classical music, where solo singing by women was common before the 1979 revolution. But since then, women singing in public has been banned. When Roya sent me this song, she included detailed compositional notes. She wrote that the opening resembles a Persian avaz, a type of vocal music that's rhythmically free, where excessive vibrato and pitch bending are signs of a skilled singer. Now, if you know anything about classical operatic music, you'll understand that being free, having excessive vibrato or bending pitch are not hallmarks of good singing. But Roya wrote, when singing these words, I want the performer to think about their initial journey and the happiness and freedom they used to have when they first sang as a child. I'd like to play you a short excerpt from Silencing Small, performed by me with Sally Whitwell on the piano.
Keep singing, keep singing, keep singing, singing, singing's my life. Keep working, singing steady. Keep singing, singing, singing's my child. No one wants to hear your voice right now. No one wants to hear your voice right now. Don't think so much, don't sing so much. Restless, release. Don't think so much, sing so much, sit, breathe. It happens so slowly, this erosion of sound. Constantly working out how to fit in the words I would say. Ache a turmeric in my tummy, my heart in my back, but I can't leave the stage. I want to throw a brick in his
Thank you. A second-generation Iranian immigrant composer, connecting her own experience of silencing to that of elite dramatic sopranos, women who seemingly have every privilege, both grappling with the same fundamental question: who gets to have a voice? And that's when I understood this research wasn't just about building Brunhilde. It was about learning how to amplify voices that have been systematically marginalized. Here's what creating songs for loud women taught me that I think matters beyond opera. First, data doesn't always have to live in reports, discursive text, or dashboards. Sometimes the most powerful way to share what you've learned is to transform it into something people can feel. Those 13 interviews became a song cycle because the visceral, embodied experience of the dramatic voice is the data. When you hear Roya's setting of Keep Singing, No One Wants to Hear Your Voice Right Now, sung by a mature, dramatic voice, that communicates something no 80,000-word thesis ever could. Second, platforming underrepresented voices requires intentional choices. I deliberately created this work with an all-female team, not because men aren't capable composers or collaborators, but because the data showed me that in the 5 best-funded Australian opera companies between 2005 and 2020, less than 3% of conductors and under 25% of directors credited were women. When the people making the decisions are overwhelmingly from one demographic, certain stories just do not get told. Certain voices don't get heard. Third, mid-career artists bring something irreplaceable. Stories. Stories that can't be told at 25 because they haven't yet been lived. These dramatic sopranos don't even begin to sing their major roles until their 40s. As one of my interviewees said, we might be late bloomers, but we never have to play Shrinking Violets. The stories these women tell about midlife, motherhood, menopause, body image, and staying visible in an industry that prefers its women young, those stories remind us that artistry isn't a race to be won early. When I sing these songs, I think about my own daughters with their loud, expressive voices. I think about Roya and all the women in Iran who would not be allowed to compose or sing any songs. And I think about the 13 women who trusted me with their stories, stories that they'd kept private because any hint of vulnerability could damage their careers. And here's the thing about dramatic voices. They're not actually louder than a 100-piece symphony orchestra. They resonate above it. They use their technique to leverage certain frequencies or harmonics that sit in different ranges to orchestral instruments. That's how the unamplified human voice can be heard over 100 musicians. It's not about volume, it's about resonance. And excitingly, that's what's happening with these stories. They're resonating. Since I started sharing this research, I've had singers from around the world reach out. They're requesting my journal on the impact of hormonal changes. The composers were moved to tears at our workshops, rethinking their own experiences of gender inequity. Singers want to sing the songs, and organisations are interested in performances. So here's my ask to you. When you go back to your organisations, think about whose voices are missing from your storytelling, from your programming, from your leadership. Think about what unconventional formats might help you share important insights. And think about the value that mid-career artists, the ones who've been through the fire and come out the other side. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but think about the value they bring to your organisation. Because maybe, just like Brunhilde, they were never really sleeping in the ring of fire. Maybe they were just waiting for the right moment to burn it all down and build something better.